Welcome again to our continuing Bible study in the book of Romans. If you remember from last week's lesson, the focus was that God had offered salvation and his blessings to the Gentiles because his chosen people, the Jews, the nation of Israel, had rejected Jesus. Now, he did not replace the Jews with the Gentiles. He just basically turned aside from them for a while until they turned back to him. And that's according to Romans 11:25. The fullness of the Gentiles be come in. That's when the last Gentile will be saved and God will come again. So God's purpose in all of this is to show mercy to everyone. Then the key idea in the remainder of Romans is relationships. Chapters 1 through 11, Paul is establishing doctrine. Now he's going to the practical application of that doctrine, and we are supposed to have a right relationship with God and all of the people that we live with and around. That's according to 1 John 4:20, I think it is. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. So in the beginning of Romans, Paul spoke mainly to the Jewish nation, and then he switched to the Gentiles, and then beginning in chapter 12, he transitions back to speaking to all of them as brethren, Jew and Gentile alike. So to outline chapter 12 that we're about to get into, believers are to dedicate themselves to God. That's in verses 1 and 2. And then to be humble and faithful, to use their spiritual gifts. That's in verses 3 through 8. Now, the focal lesson today skips those verses, and, well, I just probably won't do that. But it lists 7 spiritual gifts here: prophecy, ministry, teaching, exhortation, giving, ruling, and mercy. These verses alone would be another lesson for me, but anyway, then the rest of chapter 12, verses 9 through 16 is various duties according to those gifts that you've been given. And then the closing of chapter 12 is stressing how to live peaceably with your neighbors and all men, showing patience and kindness. So let's jump in, Romans 12:1. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Now, as I said, in chapters 1 through 11, Paul has given the various doctrines. He's proven them. And then in chapter 12, he's given practical application. Practice what you preach, not do as I say, not as I do. He's wanting us to do right, act right. But there's a word there, the second one, I beseech. Some translations it's entreat. It comes from a Greek word, parakaleo, to call near, to invite, to invoke, to implore, to exhort, to console. In the King James Version, it's translated beseech, call for, comfort, desire, exhort, entreat, pray, from dictionary.com. If you Google it, ask someone earnestly or anxiously to do something. So the Romans, as his brethren, by the mercies of God, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Now that kind of made me pause a minute, and I had a thought here, which is unusual for me. But Paul has transitioned from speaking to all the believers, Jew and Gentile. However, the example that he's using here, probably, how familiar is it to the Gentiles? Is they were never permitted to be part of the sacrificial system. Surely they knew something about it, and I'm going to assume that they did. But if you will note here, in the Jewish system, when something was sacrificed, something had to die. But Paul's talking about a living sacrifice. So this is a pretty strong appeal that he's making here. We are to submit ourselves. everything that we have, everything that we can do. I mean, that's no match for everything that God's given us. The least we can do is live for Him. But we have surely been blessed, according to Philippians 4:19. But my God shall supply all your need according to His riches in glory by Christ Jesus. Now, it's acceptable to God. It's what is a reasonable service. My paraphrase of that verse, I guess, would be, after receiving all the benefits and blessings from God because of His mercy, not anything that we have done, the least we can do is live like He has instructed us to do, and Jesus speaks pretty clearly about that in Mark 12:30 and 31. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. And what I thought about here is our children. We have them. We sacrifice most of our time, most of our resources to bring them up to hopefully have a better life than we did. But, we do without a whole lot so that they can have what they need. What we expect from them when they're grown is to show a little bit of appreciation for what we've sacrificed, and that is reasonable, and that's what it's talking about here. But we know that that doesn't always happen. So it seems to be that the greatest enemy of us doing God's will seems to be conformity to this world that we live in. But I'm going to ask you to be careful about making plans for happiness that include accumulating and enjoying things of this world, because they're going to pass away. We don't want to try to associate with or fit in with the ways of those that walk in what the Bible calls the lust of the flesh. It's just not what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to go along with the crowd to be part of the crowd, and we do that by the work of the Holy Spirit. And that begins with understanding that He lives within us. I keep stressing that week after week, that He's God in us, and He'll help you if you ask. And doing that changes your attitude. You begin to look at others in a different light. You begin to interact with them in a different way, and it changes you into the likeness, hopefully, of the one that you confess that you serve as Lord. So that's why we are to gladly give ourselves to God. That is our reasonable service. Now, as I stated, the proper lesson, skip these verses 3 through 8. I'm not going to read them. It lists, like I say, 7 gifts of the Spirit. But the first one, prophecy. How can you not tell others what God has done for you? And how can you not be willing to meet the needs of others after what God has given you? That's ministry. Why should you not try to help others to understand what God has shown to you? Teaching. Why would you not encourage others with the good news of God's mercy? That's exhortation. Why would you not be willing to share what God has blessed you with? That's giving. If you're a boss or a leader or a ruler of some kind, do you treat others with kindness? That's a gift, ruling. And if you don't show compassion to others, why would you expect God to show compassion to you? That's mercy. Now, I wrote something down here some of you might know. One of the things that humbled me during my bout with cancer was realizing how blessed that I am after seeing all of those other patients that came for treatment. Like I say, some of them didn't make it while I was going. So the downside of that for me seemed to be that people would come and check on me, and they seemed disappointed when I didn't look sick. There again, I was blessed. And then the same thing occurred when about a year ago, April 1st, 2019, I had 3 stents. And I had to go to heart rehab for 12 weeks, I think it was. But many of the people there could barely walk after having a heart attack or stroke. And to go through the exercise, it was, like I say, just really humbled me to see the courage of these people and the determination that they had. And quite frankly, I just fell in love with all of these people, my classmates, after witnessing how they overcame difficulties, and the caregivers that were there for their encouragement and compassion. It just humbled me to see that. Continuing on verse 9. Let love be without dissimulation. Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. Be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love, and in honor preferring one another. That's King James now from the New Living. Don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. Hate what is wrong. Hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection, and take delight in honoring each other. Now, Jesus spoke about that, written in red. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if you have love one to another. Now, the commentaries that I use, like I say, I've got about 12. I normally read 4 or 5 of them. They couldn't add a whole lot to these verses, but I will. The challenge to us as believers is to, the church as a whole. We are supposed to present ourselves to a lost community around us as being different, and something that the lost community would desire to be like or to participate in. The problem is, after you look at us, believers, we look just like them. We have the same divorce rate. We have the same incidences of adultery, business failures, bankruptcies, foul language, alcoholism, drug addiction, bickering, hatefulness, and folks outside the church see that and they don't want to be like us because we're just like them. It's been said the Christian army is the only army in the world that shoots its wounded, and just saying. Picking up verse 11. Not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer, distributing to the necessity of saints, given to hospitality. King James now, New Living. Never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. Rejoice in our confident hope. Be patient in trouble. And keep on praying. When God's people are in need, be ready to help them. Always be eager to practice hospitality. Again, the commentaries weren't a whole lot of help with these verses. Some things just don't need help. God's pretty plain. But the word slothful, it is used some other place in the Bible you may be familiar with. Matthew 25:26, written in red. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. This not slothful in business. Most of you know that I used to own and manage an auto parts store here in Winder, Georgia. If you've ever had a job or owned a business where you got to deal with the public, you'll understand. I used to pray in my prayer life, Lord, this is what I need to do today. Help me. And I finally figured out that wasn't what I needed to pray. It was, Lord, what would you have me do today? Show me. And it is hard to work hard. I hope you know that. It's difficult to deal with people. Some of them you know that they're lying. They're not being truthful. They're saying things you know are not so. They're trying to get something for nothing most of the time. But Galatians 6:9 tells us, and let us not be weary in well doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. Most of y'all know that I stayed in the business 33 years and I sold out, so I finally did reap my rewards, but it's tough being a good businessman. It's hard to be honest. It's when your supplier sends you a case of 12 something and charges you for one, it's tempting not to let them know when they issue credit for way more than they're supposed to because somebody made an error on a price sheet or something like that. It's difficult, however, or as I said, or to be biblical, therefore, conduct your business as if God is standing there and listening to you, because quite frankly, He is. Don't miss an opportunity to be kind and generous. And it's always easy to be nice to that 99% of your customers that are good customers and a pleasure to see. But it's difficult to be nice to those, that 1%, that is obviously sent there by Satan just to test you. But you smile and tolerate them as best you can. Moving on, Romans 12:14. Bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. That's another tough one. Most of you probably aren't old enough to have ever heard of Brother Dave Gardner. He used to say, love your enemies and drive them nuts. We've been taught to never say anything bad about anyone, but in my early days of business, I had to do business. Didn't have to, I chose to before I knew better, with a man that he was the best bad example I knew, was how I commented in Sunday school one day. If you wanted to know how to run your business, how to get along with people, keep customers happy, then look at him and do exactly opposite of what he was doing. Matthew 5:44, Jesus says, written in red, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. It's tough to deal with people like this. The sad thing, speaking of this man that I just mentioned, the sad thing is knowing what's going to happen to him one day when he stands before the God that he refuses to acknowledge and even discuss with you, and that God judges him. There's no need for me to curse him. He's cursed already. Verse 15. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Again, from the New Living. Be happy with those who are happy, and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. Never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see you're honorable. Do all that you can to live in peace. Now, it means sharing burdens. It means sharing blessings. It means that we grow together and glorify God together. But I guess all of you've had to deal with the loss of a loved one at some point in your life. If you haven't, you will. It's quite a comfort to have a church family. They show up at the funeral home. They bring more food to your house than you can eat in a month. And then after the funeral's over with, they feed your family and fellowship with you. And I guess one of the sad experiences that my wife and I have ever had to experience was the death of a next door neighbor's grandmother. Our neighbor, his sister, his mother and father, his children, they were not church people. They never attended. They didn't go. We witnessed to them to no avail. So they didn't have a church family. So we went to the funeral home, and we got there, just 15-20 minutes before visitation was supposed to be over. And there was no one there but that immediate family that I just mentioned, the son, the grandson, the great-grandchildren. Nobody there but them and Debbie and I. And when we looked at the guest book, there's only 5 or 6 people that had signed. So how do you get by without the comfort of a church family? I don't know how you do it. So the humble attitude and willingness is what marks a Christian who does what he's supposed to. Verse 15, remember it said, don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people. Jesus had something to say about that. I always like to quote him. But he said unto them in his doctrine, this is Mark 12:38, beware of the scribes, which love to go in long clothing and love salutations in the marketplaces, and the chief seats in the synagogues and the uppermost rooms at feast, which devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. These shall receive greater damnation. It says, if it be possible, if it can be done. This is implying by Paul that sometimes it just cannot. To be a good neighbor, to have good neighbors, you got to be a good neighbor. To have good employees, you got to be a good employer. To have good customers, you got to treat them right, be honest and fair. To influence a lost community, we got to be different. But according to Paul, sometimes that's tough. Now, I think our focus in chapter 12 is to live our lives in such a way that others will know who we serve and hopefully desire to know him by our witness and what we say and what we do. As part of my business, I take my customers out to lunch occasionally to thank them for doing business with me. Most of these customers were lost. I tried to witness to them as best I could, but what did my heart good is whenever I take them out and we got our meals and we sat down, they'd ask me, don't you need to say a blessing? These are lost people, unsaved, unchurched. It's strange that they know what to do. They just choose not to do it because they're scared of what they might have to give up. So my question to you is, what are you afraid to give up to serve Jesus? Thank you.